So welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here today. It's great to have you all. We are here today to talk about surrogacy and IVF, and we're going to just hear from the perspectives of two sets of dads, or one dad is going to be speaking on behalf of his husband as well, but two sets of dads who are going to talk about their surrogacy and IVF journey. And what's really interesting is one of the dads is from US and lives in the US, and the other is going to be talking about a surrogacy journey from afar, from the UK, actually. So you're in for a special treat. And I want to thank Justin from Philadelphia, if you want to wave, Justin, and thank you. And British American dads, Jamie and Kenny, from joining us from the UK. And thank you all for joining us, whether you're on Zoom or here or on Facebook. We're going to start by having each of these guys share their story. But before we do, I want to give these guys a special shout out, because not only have they each shared their stories with us before and we published them and shared them on social media, but they're all GWK Academy mentors. And for that, we're very grateful. Now, what does that mean? That means that they're open to supporting those who enroll in GWK Academy's surrogacy course. And they're here for guidance, for support, to ask questions, to act as cheerleaders, etc. I guess I should do a quick commercial interruption for those who don't already know that GWK Academy is our app/platform to help you become a dad. And you can download GWK Academy from your favorite app store or visit us at gwkacademy.com. Now, I do want to invite everybody participating, again, either here on Zoom or from Facebook, to ask questions. These guys have said that they're more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Use on Zoom, use the chat or the Q&A function located at the bottom of the screen. If you're on Facebook, just leave a comment underneath this video, and we'll be happy to get to them. I do suggest that you ask your questions as soon as they come up, so you don't forget them, but note that we're going to save your questions till the end. I'm going to ask the guys to start talking first, and then I'm going to share a couple of questions that we actually received in advance from email. All right, so dads, as you talk, share your story to kick things off. We'd love to learn, how or why you chose surrogacy, how you actually got your journey started, how you chose your family building partners. Let's face it, that's an extremely important part of a surrogacy journey. How long it took, and any hurdles you had to overcome. Does that sound cool? All right. Why don't we start with you, Justin, from Philadelphia?
Okay. Hello, everybody. As Brian said, my husband and I live in Elkins Park, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. We have two kids. Our daughter is 3 years old, and our son just turned a year old. And our surrogacy journey started, I would even say, back when my husband and I met. We met in 2012, and on our probably second or third date, we were just having conversations about, future plans and, future goals for ourselves. And we, somehow the topic came up of like, are you someone who's interested in having kids one day? And that's something that we both, were on the same page about. So we knew as we were building our relationship that this was something that, if we were to one day get married, that this would be, part of our future. Fast forward, we, got married in 2016. And I think even before we got married, we started kind of doing the research on, queer family building for cis gay men. And it's funny in terms of like sort of what led us to surrogacy. I think we started off just with this awareness that, like, as cis gay men, like the two primary options would either be adoption or surrogacy, and both seemed really interesting. I think with adoption, like many people, we had a frame of reference from knowing people who were adopted or parents who adopted their kids. Like we had several frames of reference of like what that form of family building looked like. Whereas with surrogacy, with the exception of like a few celebrities, like we didn't know anyone personally who had gone through surrogacy. So we had just a lot of questions about it. And the process in the beginning actually seemed almost like unrealistic or like not realistic for us. So somehow I might have even just been on a Google search. I came across this organization, Men Having Babies. And at the time we were living in the New York area, and Men Having Babies had meetings in New York, in addition to cities around the country, and I think even now around the globe.
Yep.
But we started going to the ones in New York, and Men Having Babies is an organization that like is, I think, specific for queer men who are building their family through surrogacy. So a lot of the information that we got there was specific to the surrogacy. And that really is, I think, what was the turning point in terms of deciding that we were going to build our family through surrogacy, because we ended up meeting actual gay dads who built their family through surrogacy, and meeting actual, not in addition to meeting the dads who went through the process, we also met actual surrogates. We met egg donors. Like we met people who were in all parts of the process. We met representatives from different surrogacy agencies around the US, from different IVF clinics around the US. And so what went from being a process that seemed really kind of like abstract and only for like the super wealthy and then celebrities, ended up feeling like, oh, okay, like we actually know folks who've done this, and this now seems like something that we can like map out. And and it also just seemed like a really beautiful way of building a family. And that was like, kind of unique from other forms of family building we had known of. So I think that was, yeah, that was definitely a turning point in terms of deciding that this would be the path we would pursue to parenthood. And then and so in addition to these meetings with Men Having Babies, and each month, I think it was monthly, they'd have a different theme. So sometimes it would be on the financial aspects of surrogacy, and next month it might be the psychological aspects and sort of what to prepare for mentally as you go through this process. Another month would be the medical aspects of it, and how the inner workings of IVF, in vitro fertilization. And then periodically, I think once a year, they'd have a conference where different surrogacy agencies and fertility clinics, IVF clinics would come and set up tables. And so you had a chance to actually like really get to know or get to meet different agencies and get a feel for like, what they offer, what their vibe is, what their prices are, like all, you get like as much information about them as you can. And so we ultimately ended up with deciding to move forward with San Diego Fertility Center for our IVF journey. And then for our surrogacy journey, we ended up working with the agency Simple Surrogacy, which is based in Texas, Dallas. And it was, I mean, yeah, I think we after doing a lot of research, we're very happy with both choices. So with the IVF aspect at San Diego Fertility, I don't know if all fertility clinics have this, but San Diego Fertility Center also had their own database of egg donors. So we were able to, utilize their database to look through, to view their egg donors. We also look outside of San Diego Fertility at egg donors, but we really liked sort of the options, that were available to us at San Diego Fertility. And it was through there that we ended up choosing our egg donor. Our kind of main criteria, we were pretty open, but we wanted someone who had good fertility, and the San Diego Fertility Center offered, I forget what the tests were called, but they're able to test potential egg donors' fertility levels to get a sense of what their egg yield might be. So one was our main criteria was like someone who had good fertility. We had a racial ethnic component. I'm half Black, half Iranian. My husband's also Black, specifically from Haiti. So we want an egg donor who is either Black or biracial mixed with Black. So in addition to fertility and race, we also want an egg donor who is open to being a known donor. A lot of places the egg donors choose to be anonymous, which is totally fine. We though kind of had the preference of wanting someone who was open to the possibility of being known in case our kids one day wanted to know her. And so at San Diego Fertility, they actually did have some egg donors who, had checked off that they'd be open to being a known donor. So we searched through profiles, we found an egg donor who we just fell in love with her profile, and just her responses to things were super thoughtful, in addition to sort of the external, very beautiful woman. And so we moved forward with working with her. And then through Simple Surrogacy, their process is you create a profile. If you're doing it with the spouse, you and your spouse create a profile about yourselves. The profiles are shown to their surrogates, and the surrogate actually gets to choose first if she wants to move forward with working with an intended parent. And then so once you get sent a profile of a surrogate, that means that surrogate has already chosen to work with your family, which I think is pretty neat. That like it's sort of the ball kind of starts in their court to choose who they feel comfortable moving forward with. So our surrogate chose us, and we like adore her. Like, she's one of the most altruistic, kind humans. She has her and her husband have 3 kids of their own, and part of the criteria with the surrogacy side of choosing of how they choose surrogates is someone who's already had healthy pregnancies and carried them to term. So she, has had at that point had 3 healthy pregnancies carried to term. So we moved forward with working with her, and she ended up actually being the surrogate with both kids. So with our daughter Ava, and also with our son Olivier. She carried both of them roughly 27 months apart. Yeah, it's been, a really lovely way of building our family. We still maintain pretty regular contact over text with our surrogate, sending her photos of the kids, and then she, sends us photos of her kids. And we've gone out to see each other a few times, particularly with the second pregnancy with our son. We even brought our daughter back out to where she lives. And then even with our egg donor, since, like I said, she was open to being a known donor, we've actually never met our egg donor in person, but we a few times a year, usually on the kids' birthdays and also around the holidays, send pictures, and then she'll respond actually with sending photos of what she looked like at those ages. So we kind of get like this cool sense of like, we know on our side sort of what the genetic resemblances are for me and my husband, but to kind of see from our egg donor too, like we're like, oh wow, like this is pretty neat. So yeah, I'm not sure if that was
perfect. That's
enough.
great.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Justin. A couple of things I want to just add to that. So San Diego Fertility Center and Simple Surrogacy. So at Gays with GWK Academy, we work with a small exclusive network of family building partners. Actually, all you guys have worked with our family building partners, which is of course not an accident. But we work with a small exclusive network because honestly today there's so many surrogacy agencies, so many IVF clinics, so many egg donor agencies they could go to that I know it's overwhelming for a lot of people to figure out who to work with. And a lot of them are good. Not all of them are equal for sure. And so what we've done is the ones that we know have long-standing reputations, that they're from very reputable organizations, and the docs that we work with or the agency folks that we work with are also indisputable leaders within their industries. And they share my passion, quite frankly, to help all of you guys become dads. And so if you want access to family building partners, that's another part of the benefit of GWK Academy. I'm also going to talk more about known egg donation. That was a question we got in advance. But before I talk about my own personal experience with that, I'd like to now go over to, I love saying British Americans. I feel like it's British American Airlines. But so do you guys want to share all the information that we just got from Justin and explain how you're British Americans and all that?
Yeah, great. So our story, relatively straightforward. Kenny and I both are from the States originally, down south in Louisiana. But post university, we made our way to the Northeast and made New York City home for many, many years. And as a result of work, we both relocated to the UK back in 2010. So about 13 years ago at this stage. We had always spoke about having children, and we had considered both surrogacy as well as adoption in terms of possible routes. One of the things that I would note is that adoption seemed a bit overwhelming to us when we were looking to begin a family. And that was partly due to the fact that we had not been in the UK long. And at that stage, we weren't yet citizens. And therefore, there was a sense of uncertainty as to how long we would be in the country and what our future in the UK would be, and when we might return to the US, or if we might return to the US. And also there was a question mark around how an adoption would be treated for, at that time, American citizens living abroad. And it very much looked like it would probably take the form of an international adoption, even if we were adopting locally. So there was clearly a real positive for us, I think, in terms of choosing or selecting surrogacy as an option. We attended a couple of local conferences, events that were organized by a Tel Aviv agency. And that's how we originally began to hear a bit more about the process, and understand, some of the players, if you like, in regard to the journey. And that led us to Idaho Reproductive Center in Boise, who we ultimately worked with in terms of our fertility clinic. And similar to what Justin described, they had the ability to also provide options in terms of egg donation. In our example, it was anonymous egg donors. At least that, I think, was what was limited at the time. Things clearly could have moved on over the course of the past 6 years. But we went through their database and selected an egg donor. Similar to Justin, I mean, we were pretty open, but I think there were a couple of things that we weren't flexible on, and it was primarily around considerations in terms of health or things that might contribute to health. So we were quite interested in whether the egg donors' parents were still living, whether their the grandparents, paternal and maternal grandparents, were still alive, and if not, what were possibly the causes, and just trying to get a bit better handle and understanding on what you might expect. And so it was kind of looking closely at kind of the medical questionnaires, et cetera, and equally the motives behind why they were looking to make that donation. And so that led us to a selection with an egg donor associated with the fertility clinic. For our surrogate, we used an agency that was local to the fertility clinic called Host of Possibilities. And they were really amazing to work with. They actually provided us with someone who they thought we would work well with, and wanted to make an introduction. And that was after they'd gotten to know us a bit. And so they organized a time for us to speak. If I'm not mistaken, it was really interesting. I think we actually had to take the call via video call because we were on holiday with our family in Venice. So
we'll just throw that in.
So it was an odd thing. We just jumped into like a little corridor, I think, of the hotel, and had a video call on our mobile phone while we were on holiday.
And she was originally from Louisiana, sounded like me with the twang, and just funny. She had 2 kids of her own. She adopted 2 other kids. So, and then, she just said, she said, "Oh, I've been told that I have a hospitable uterus."
She did. She was
for 2 gay men who don't even know what a uterus is. We were like,
this sounds positive.
Thank you for that information. So she just fit. She was perfect. She was sweet, funny. Her husband was hilarious. Her two kids are amazing. So we knew we found her when we found her. It was like,
there was an
Right on.
immediate connection.
Yeah.
There, I can't describe it necessarily, but there was something that just kind of pulled us together, probably a whole host of things. And I think we really knew it was solidified when we were making a trip from the UK to Boise, Idaho, in order to make a deposit. And I'm sure everyone knows what we're talking about. And we had the benefit while we were in town to actually meet then face to face with our surrogate. So we met at a restaurant for lunch, or at that time, our potential surrogate was still not yet fully decided, even though we felt a really good, great connection. We wanted an opportunity to meet with her face to face. And when we did, there were no questions. It was just immediately confirmed for us that she was the right individual. As mentioned, we selected our egg donor through the fertility clinic. They went through the process of harvesting eggs. One of the things we did consider, I should have noted this earlier, is we wanted to do something called split fertilization. And so therefore the egg yield is very important with some of these processes. So that was one of the things that we also considered, was what was the likelihood of getting a relatively large quantity of eggs, but of good quality. And so that was also a determining factor. So we did split fertilization, and then we progressed with our surrogate in terms of transferring 2 embryos. I remember we were a bit naive at the time. We talked a bit about the probability, if you like, percentages in terms of whether there would be success, and whether that be success of a singleton versus multiples, even having transferred 2 embryos. And now looking back, that probability was probably higher than what at the time we thought. We thought, okay, let's just go at this and hope for the best. And that's exactly what happens. We had the perfect outcome in that both embryos that were transferred were sticky, and that led to the birth of our son and daughter.
so it's the same egg donor, 2 dads. So one looks like me, one looks like him, but they look like the egg donor in layman terms.
Yeah, it's
That's how I had to be explained to. So
it's interesting because people all the time say, "Oh, you can tell they're twins. They look so much alike," and clearly they would, because they share the same DNA. But then they equally look like us. Everyone tells us. So it is amusing when people try to figure out how it all came about.
That's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. What's funny is we have twins as well through surrogacy and IVF. And it turns out that my husband's little guys didn't swim. And so they couldn't make it. And actually, I'm HIV positive. I have been for a very long time. And I'm the biological dad of both of our girls, and we use the same egg donor. And they don't even look like they're remotely related to each other. So it's very interesting. So one question I have for you guys, how was your journey in the US while you're living in the UK? How was that? How did that feel? For other people who maybe are also non-US residents who are considering hosting a surrogacy journey here in the US, how was that? I know you guys actually ended up moving for a time, right?
We did. I mean, when we realized that there was a real risk that our surrogate might go into early term labor, and therefore the twins be delivered prematurely, we decided to make a move to the home state of our surrogate, so Illinois. And we did that about 2 months or thereabouts, just a month and a half, 2 months before she was scheduled to be induced. But funny enough, I think it was the right choice, because we arrived in Chicago only 10 days before she gave birth to our twins. And so we were there just in time, and we remained there with the twins until we brought them back home to the UK about 6 to 8 weeks later.
Oh, wow.
But in terms of your question around the process, I actually felt that the process went relatively smoothly. I mean, I know every journey is so different, but for us, and we clearly had the ups and downs and the challenges that we all face with respect to any type of journey. But I felt like it went relatively well. I think a lot of that was down to sufficient preparation. I'm quite an A-type personality, like to be in control of things. And I had to accept early on that there was so much that was outside of my control. But that which was within our control, it was very important that we felt like we had control over that. And it was little things like setting up expectations early on with our surrogate and other, other individuals involved in the process around the way in which we communicated and the frequency of communication. So you felt as though you were connected, even though in reality you're so far removed and so remote. So it was things like that. I mean, I think we probably got messages from our surrogate almost daily. We were constantly in contact and sharing information back and forth, and really got to know her and her family.
She would call us and she's like, your children have given me heartburn.
Yeah, anything.
Your children. And then she would show a foot,
Yeah.
which was creepy. It was just, it was never like our kids. It was always yours. She completely had removed herself from the situation. She was an incubator. She was like, I don't know who's on the bottom, but this one is sleeping. This one needs to quit being J-Lo and kicking me all night. So she was very good about, making us feel like, she was a part of it, but she was, they were our kids. And
early on, and we felt part of the journey because of it. She was constantly informing us and describing what she was experiencing, very similar to, I think, what you would have felt like had you'd been there going through the journey with her, like literally just holding her hand.
Even though we were in England, just because we were there, we knew that we were going to come to Chicago to live for those 3 months. I thought we were going to be in Chicago for 2 months before she had. So I had 2 months to lay out, get some sun, go to a baseball game, and relax.
That didn't happen.
We get there, and she's like, I think I wet my pants. I'm like, oh, here we go. And then we,
off we went.
Yeah, and we had flip-flops on and t-shirts and shorts, showed up at the hospital, and I was like, I cannot be at the birth of my kids with flip-flops on and a tank top with Chicago on it. I can't. So it was quite an experience, but a good one.
That's really, really great. Reminds a lot of stuff that's similar to mine. And you guys have been together a long time, right?
This birth.
Yeah, can you tell he's a comedian? He's not just an author, he's a comedian.
It's close to birth because I know how many years you've been together. But why
we just celebrated 30 years in this past September, so it'll be 31 in a few months.
So my husband and I just celebrated our 30th in June, but we are a lot older.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's the same to you. So that's why I say I know it probably has been since birth. Great stories. I had a couple of questions, but I'm going to go take one that we've received through Q&A. Personal question, like they're not all personal questions. Maybe just give us ballparks. People want to know how much it costs. So if you guys want to just talk, if you're able to, if you even remember how much your journeys cost, and then Justin, we come to you. If you could share anything about like other, were there savings involved for your second journey? And then when you guys are done, I'll put everything into context. So actually, Justin, why don't I go with you first, because you could talk about a singleton journey twice, and if there were savings, and then you guys can talk about a twin journey.
Okay. So I remember part of why we chose simple surrogacy for our journey was because of also like geographically their location in Texas. Like one of the things that they kind of advertise and sell about themselves is that their prices are relative to some of the other agencies based off of where they are in the US, they're slightly more affordable. Of course, affordability in the context of surrogacy is still quite expensive. So I honestly can't, since there's so many different prices to like factor in, like I really can't, between like when you add up like the surrogacy costs, the IVF costs, the legal costs, like everything is kind of paid separately. So I think it's safe to say that probably was 100K like for the first journey in total. The second journey is definitely more affordable. One, because you already, or thankfully in our case, our surrogate wanted to carry for us again. So we didn't have to pay like a matching fee the second time around, which that in itself is several $1,000s. And we also, you know, we, all of the embryos created from the first journey, like the IVF piece was basically that the part of like, you know, the egg donor part was complete the first time around. So there was no second cost the second time around. The only second cost fertility wise was the cost of transferring the embryos into the surrogate. So the second time around definitely was, you know, wasn't, you know, 100K, because a lot of those costs were the first time around. But yeah, I think in terms of like looking at finances, part of it is sort of where in the country you're choosing to work. If you're working with a US based agency, I think from what I remember, actually some of the ones outside of the US, like the ones in Canada, I think were more affordable. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, so you know, that's definitely something to factor in terms of location. I remember also Men Having Babies had this, I think it was called, I forget the
Yeah.
acronym, but it was kind of like a
Yeah, the Gay Parents Assistance Program, yes.
exactly
And that's,
GPAP.
and they offer grant money. They have two levels. GWK Academy offers the same thing. So if you work with our affiliate partners, you get the same discounts that you would get for Men Having Babies. And then they offer a second level. I don't know how many grants they give out a year for people who are really struggling to come up with the financial resources.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Justin. Guys, how about, and by the way, I should have prefaced this to say that surrogacy has gone up even since Justin's most recent journey, because it's a lot more than that right now. But I am curious, before I share the current data, our British American friends, how much, I want to just keep saying that because that's how much, approximately how much you paid in USDs?
I think we were probably somewhere between 140 and 160, realistically. Now, that might be slightly adjusted for the fact that we were working with an agency out of Tel Aviv in terms of helping us guide us through that process. So clearly things that, you know, now more and more education understanding exists that that some might not choose or need that type of assistance, or but so we had that. The other thing I think that clearly influences it is multiples. So it's these small incremental additive amounts whereby you're talking about multiples versus a singleton. For example, it's little things like maternity clothing. So there's an added stipend that's related to maternity clothing generally. So clearly everything is subject to negotiation, but there's just these added costs that come into play. The other thing I would denote to indicate is that there's also the element of medical, whereby our children were born early, and so we had some added cost in terms of co-pays and deductibles, et cetera, as both of our children spent time in the NICU before they were ready to come home.
Right, and then also insurance, and your employer is UK, not US based, correct? Yeah, so
That's right.
Some extra insurance as well. So here's what we tell people today when I'm talking to folks through GWK Academy. You should expect to budget somewhere, thankfully you're all sitting, between 140,000 and 220,000. And that gap is due, as you all know, there are a lot of variables, some of which you can control, some of which you can't. So what we found is that on a high end, it can come in. And honestly, I've talked to people who spent already, more than that. But that doesn't mean that they probably could have done it differently and save some money. So I'd say about 140,000, 220,000. So we actually got another question in advance. People want to know a couple of things. Number one is, are you still in touch with your surrogate? So Justin, we already know from you, but Jamie and Kenny, are you guys still in touch? I don't remember hearing about that. And then two, how are you guys talking about this with your kids, about your surrogacy journey and how you guys became a family?
We are still in contact with our
She
surrogates.
texted today.
Yeah, so
He knew you're going to do this webinar.
yeah, indeed, it was subliminal.
I mean, with her husband's a chef, so I'm always texting about recipes and food and things. And just because we have a girl and two guys, we've got a son and a daughter, and then the daughter, she's got body parts we don't know what is going on. So we have sisters.
So it's
and
books,
so
sisters,
it's
moms.
we'll ask her questions, and she's like, "Oh, I have a daughter. This is what this is. This is what this is." But yeah, I mean, at least once or twice a month, just send pictures of her kids, our kids. We talk to her, like she's an aunt almost to the kids. And as far as their relationship, the kids have always known since they were babies, they knew that they had two helpers. The way we explained it, they have two helpers. They had Miss Sandy, who was in her belly, and we call her the egg lady, which is not probably appropriate, but I don't care. So she's the egg lady, and they don't say that, but they're like, we had two helpers. So they know that they had two helpers that helped Daddy and Papa have kids. And Miss Sandy, because we have pictures of Miss Sandy, we have pictures of her pregnant with them.
Yep.
She can't, she's met them a couple times, not recently because we're just so far apart. Right. But we've made sure to point it out that they know that. And then we've had, because they're 6 years old and in year 2, second grade, kids want to know, like, where's the mom? And like, oh, we don't have a mom. We have two helpers, Miss Sandy and the other lady. So it's just been a part of them knowing it.
We started early. We did. We wanted to make sure that that as they got older, there was never a moment whereby they said, oh, I had an aha moment or I was told. We really wanted them to feel as though they don't remember anything other than this is their story.
And what's good about it, like for kids their age, when they I've watched this happen at birthday parties, they're like, well, where's your mom? Oh, I have two dads, or we had two, they'll explain it in such a way to their other friends, and the other friends are like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and then move on.
And move on. Yeah, let's kick a soccer ball around.
They don't, it doesn't, it's not like they
have an issue with that. Like the kids don't care at all.
No, they're just inquisitive, right? I mean, that's the only reason they're asking in the first place, right? They just want to understand and they're interested. But yeah, we've remained in contact, we remained close, and we've tried to always keep the kids informed in a way that's appropriate based on their age, and that's evolving as they get older.
Great, thanks. How about you, Justin? How about you guys? Oh, I think Justin might be frozen. So then while we're waiting for him to come back on, I will share my story. As I said, we have twin girls who are 12 and a half up. Well, actually, they'll be 13 next month through surrogacy as well. We had a known egg donation, and hey, welcome back. I'll come back to you in a second. We had known egg donation. We met our egg donor once. That was when she came to the clinic to get tested. And she agreed way back to our son, who's adopted, is a closed adoption. And so we were already thinking back then, like we were concerned because what kind of issues will he have? Would he have when he got older? So we really wanted to make sure that the next child or children that we would have we wouldn't have to worry about that. And so we really wanted to know an egg donation, but this was 14 years ago when we were having these conversations. I don't even think they had contracts that you could sign back then. But we asked Lauren, our egg donor, if she would be open to it. She said, yeah, absolutely. And over the years, like you had said, and I'm sure Justin's going to share the same, we share very age appropriate language, how our family came to be, and that there were two helpers as well. One woman who carried them, and we called her our egg donor. Is what I think actually the egg lady is probably better. We called her the egg donor. And in the last year and a half, girls started asking a lot of questions about her. And so finally went and we scheduled a video call right before they went to summer camp. And we had a video call. It was the first time my husband and I had seen our egg donor as well since the time we had met her, and you know, we see each other on Facebook occasionally, but and it was just awesome. We had the girls prepare a list of questions that they had. Lauren also shared photos in advance, and it was interesting because one of the things we kept telling our daughter, Sadie is very athletic. Oh, those are genes that you get from our egg donor, because you know, Daddy and Papa, stereotypical. We have no athletic genes at all. And so when we're talking about this, Sadie asked Lauren to talk about her athletic prowess, and she's like, "Oh, I'm not athletic at all." She said, "I can't even throw a ball." She looked at me, and she said, "But my sister is very athletic." So it turns out that, and this is a good point to make, it turns out that the egg donors, my Sadie has a few traits from my sister and from her egg donor's sister. More traits from them than she has from me or from her egg donor, which was also very interesting. So it was a wonderful conversation. I probably cried through most of it. So if you can do a known egg donation, I do. It's not always possible, as these guys know, but if it is, I do strongly encourage it. Justin, welcome back. I was asking you to share, how do you talk about with your kids, and they're very young, so are you talking about it yet, and how they came to be and how their family came to be? Oh, you're back on mute also. Sorry.
Sorry, I was having some connection issues. I don't know
No
what
worries, no worries.
But you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, you know, as you noted, my kids are still pretty young, but we actually, you know, with my daughter, kind of in preparing her to have a sibling, we did have to, at the time she was 2, we did have to have conversations with her to prepare her, because you know, so I guess for context, since you know my oldest is 3, she was born right at the start of COVID. She was born in April of 2020. So you know, in terms of like, you know, our son was born last year, so in terms of travel to where our surrogate is, we still like didn't want to necessarily bring her in terms of like potential exposure. So we were already just preparing her for the fact that like Daddy and Papa are going to be away for a few days, and you know, how to like kind of prepare her for that. But then we also just throughout the pregnancy were explaining to her, you know, like, so we have pictures at home of our surrogate when she was pregnant with our daughter. And so, and we always say, you know, like, you know, this is our friend, you know, we say her name, and we say, you know, you used to be in her belly, and we're saying, you know, soon you're going to have a baby brother, and he's actually, you know, in her belly. And what was actually really awesome was that our daughter loves being read to. My husband's an artist, and a lot of our friends as a result are also artists. And so one of our really good friends, I sent him photos and text of like storybook text, and he does graphic design. So he kind of helped create like him and my husband both together created like a book that we read to her at bedtime, that basically, you know, detailed what the journey would look like. So it's a picture of her and a picture of, you know, pictures of me and my husband, pictures of our surrogate, and just kind of explaining, you know, we're gonna go to Ohio for a few days, you know, when your baby brother's gonna be born, you're gonna stay with grandma and Auntie Sheena and your cousin while we're away. And, you know, when we come back, we'll have, you know, with your baby brother. And so like presenting it to her in story form, I found was really helpful. So in addition to explaining it to her in that way, we also, I think at like the 20-week mark, at some point during the pregnancy with our son, we went out there for the ultrasound, but we actually did bring our daughter to that trip too. So she got to like, you know, see our surrogate again, and there's our surrogate's husband and kids. And you know, we definitely moving forward, in addition to maintaining contact with them over text, like you know, we hope to be able to maybe every few years or so get together in person, so that the kids could, you know, like I feel like they've absolutely become part of our family, and it's important for our kids to know their story of how, you know, how they came to be. And yeah, we haven't totally explained like the egg donor piece yet, but I think as soon as they're, I like the language you guys use of like the egg lady. I think that's totally, that could totally work. So thanks for that tip. But we definitely plan on being fully transparent about, explaining it to them, and leaving it up to them what types of relationships they would like to have, if they would like to have with both, with our surrogate, with our egg donor.
There's a lot of good books that we got. Well, I mean, some go into graphic detail, but then there's some like sweet stories about like two penguins. And then there's
oh yeah, that's a lovely one.
what's that Doogie Howser guy? He wrote a book, the actor, him and his husband.
Oh, Neil Patrick
Oh,
Harris.
Yeah, I think
Yeah. So there's
You're
book.
dating yourself.
yeah, indeed.
I never saw that. I'm only 28. Howser. But yeah, there's lots of books out there for the kids, and we've read them all. But once they got it, they got it. They don't need to be reassured all the time. My daughter's just like, how's Sandy, Miss Sandy, Miss Sandy, because we have a picture in the hallway of them from, infants, from little egg things till now. And they follow around. They're like, oh, that's when we were in Miss Sandy's belly. And so, even at a young age, once they got it, they got it. You don't have to reinforce it. They got it,
I think it's sometimes we as adults are the ones that overprocess and maybe overthink
or over worry.
and I think you just keep it very simple, and it's interesting how in that simplicity they get it. And
Yeah, agreed. My husband actually, who's a lot more eloquent than I am, wrote a very short story for Levi about how our family came to be, that we read to him every night, for the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 years of his life. And then when the girls were born, the same thing about how we grew our family. And they're both not blog posts sitting on gayswithkids.com, but yeah, I think that we read those so as you can imagine, very, very simplistic language, since wonder we started that. But it was really great. I've talked to a ton of people who've done similar stuff, where just keep it very simple, but start talking about it. It's day one. So guys, I've already kept you late, and everyone watching late, because I know we're supposed to end 5 minutes ago. But before I let everyone go, one last thing for the dads, and then a quick announcement for everyone else. Anything else, Justin, you want to share to someone considering a surrogacy journey, or the greatest advice you have, or something that surprised you about being a dad? Any of the three, and then I'll ask our British American friends the same thing.
Yeah, being a dad is everything that I dreamed of and more. Just so many beautiful, amazing moments with the kids, in addition to obviously the challenges that all parents face, but it definitely feels deeply fulfilling. In terms of advice, I would say programs like Gays with Kids Academy, and meeting with mentors like us, or folks, whether you're considering surrogacy or adoption or whatever path to parenthood, I just really recommend connecting with folks who've gone through that journey, because I know for us that was so helpful, of being able to connect with other dads who went through this process, and all of the tips and advice they had along the way really made a lot of our process a lot smoother than it might have been had we not had that advice. So definitely connecting with other dads.
Great, thank you. That's great. Jamie and Kenny.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an amazing journey, and I'm really excited to see what the years ahead of us bring. To I think Justin's point, it's more than I would have ever imagined. It's extremely rewarding, but it's extremely challenging. There's the good days and the bad days, but you just kind of truck on, and you look on to the next day, to the next thing. In terms of my advice, and Kenny, I'm sure will have some thoughts, but in terms of my advice is, there's really think long and hard about timing. I personally believe that I put too much emphasis on when is it the right time, and there's always some reason whereby you could delay starting your journey. I want more money. I want a bigger house. I want, there's all of these factors. And I think looking back, clearly I wouldn't change anything because I wouldn't be where I am today if I were. But I think I would have probably been more open about starting that journey earlier in our relationship and in our life. So that's the key takeaway is just to think more critically about timing and be a bit more open. And then the last thing I would say is there's so many unknowns. Every journey is so different, and it's very difficult to do any like for like comparison because there is no journey that's truly like for like. So I would just say, do as much research as you can, and therefore you're making informed decisions, but also equally accept that there are so many uncertainties and unknowns, and therefore try to get comfortable with what you can't control.
Especially from someone who's a control freak. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I'd say before you do it, go ahead and get your sleep now. Learn to love fish fingers and chicken fingers and rainbow cereal, which is Lucky Charms, because that's all they're going to eat for the first 4 years.
Even if you do have to go out and pay £12 for a box of it in the UK because it doesn't.
Y'all need to send us some Lucky Charms. That's what y'all need to do.
Kenny, you said fish fingers because you're living in London where everyone eats the fish and chips.
This is
Yes.
I know. It's just every day, as they get older, you now pick up on the personalities and how we've molded them into little creatures. I don't know how you explain
Our
it.
little beings.
Our little people, like, my daughter does this and does her, you just every day it's just like such a reward to see, oh God, they're just like us. What did we do wrong? But, my daughter doesn't like Madonna. I don't understand it. She won't. She's just like, no, I like the Taylor. No, okay, you're not listening to Taylor Swift in my house. But I'm joking. I love her too. It's a great journey, and it ended very well for us, and we got
very blessed.
They're 6, so we got till we can send them to boarding school or to university.
I certainly hope Taylor is not watching right now.
I love Taylor. I love her, but she's supposed to love Madonna. That's Vanessa Williams. Those two.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate this. You have someone commented great advice, especially on timing, getting comfortable with things you can't control. Thank you, Ronnie. I couldn't agree with you more. That's true. Thank you all very much. And those of you watching, whether you're on Zoom or on Facebook, if you have any questions for me about GWK Academy or these guys, feel free to send me an email, dads@gayswithkids.com. And I promise I will forward it on to the guys. In fact, Justin, I already have something for you that I'm going to email that came up from someone. So also, if you're looking for GWK Academy, it's an app. You can just go to your favorite app store, download it for free. Check out, find your path to fatherhood to learn more about surrogacy and IVF, adoption, and foster care. Dads, thank you so much for joining us. It was great. I enjoyed getting this opportunity to meet you in not IRL, but at least by video. It was great to hear your stories. Thank you so much for sharing. And all have a great rest of the summer and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All the best.